Hello and welcome to the next episode of Cylinder Radio. I'm your host, Will Roosh, high school teacher in Los Angeles. And today I'm going to talk to Travis Brown, who is a filmmaker and currently producing and filming a movie called When in Doubt, a documentary that I want to learn about. But when I saw him on social media and the social media account for his production, I was like, oh, this guy I need on my podcast because there's just so much alignment. And this world that we're in is actually kind of small, but the people that I saw that he's filming are people like Daryl Davis and Anthony Magnabosco and Peter Boghossian and Douglas Murray. And, I had street epistemology on my podcast already with Reed from Cordial Curiosity. Peter Boghossian, did my podcast when it was new and really took a chance on me, and which was really awesome. And I had James Lindsay on and all that kind of stuff. So when I saw you, Travis, welcome, by the way.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, when I saw you, I was like, okay, this is someone that I want to try and support. I think that's a fairly small community of people who are seeing what's going on in the world right now, and I think the more that we can have a coalition of helping one another out, I think the better. So that was my
yeah, for sure. No, I really appreciate you having me on. And just to explain my situation here, I have a really bad back, and I have to spend most of my time horizontal. So it makes filming a challenge, but I've got a really good crew and some good producers to help me out. But that's the explanation for my situation here.
Well, thanks for saying. Yeah, I just thought that you were very relaxed.
That too. Yeah.
Did you ever? I don't know what we don't have to get into your back issue. I was just curious if you ever read. Whenever I hear people with back issue, I always think of John Sarno.
Yeah, I know of the book. It's the way in which it went out initially was I made my first film in 2016 called All Too Human, which is a fictional narrative based largely around some of Nietzsche's philosophy. And I just worked myself way too hard, didn't sleep very much. It was extremely stressful. My back went out, and then just sort of out of nowhere. And then I did physical therapy, and then in 2017, physical therapy ended up sending me to the ER and sort of put me in this condition that I haven't been able to get out of. And I've tried literally about everything. So it's frustrating, but that's I keep making my projects and just focusing on that, and that's what keeps me going. So
I hear you, man. That sucks. I don't know what to say.
That's all right.
No, let's transition. See, I told you when you first started this, you're like, I don't do a lot of podcasts. I was like, well, I'm bad at it, so we're both.
That's all right.
but no. Thanks for doing this, man. So just bring us in a little bit about how you kind of dove into this world. My audience, has been following. I jumped in through the Joe Rogan podcast, and then it was Brett Weinstein at Evergreen and Jordan Peterson in Toronto and Nick Christakis in Yale, and then that just started this crazy avalanche for me. But how did you get into this whole thing?
Initially, it was sort of through the quote unquote new atheist movement. Mm-hmm. I grew up in a fundamentalist Christian home, very conservative, very controlled environment, and I very slowly left that behind and started reading books like Nietzsche and Bertrand Russell and people like that. And then I started to write my own sort of expose, if you will, on Christianity, trying to deconstruct it and show what I thought were some negative elements psychologically. And that led me to like Christopher Hitchens and Dawkins. They both came out with their books in mid 2000s or so. And so then I kind of stumbled upon that and found Sam Harris, and I really liked that he talked about meditation and all these other issues that were outside of atheism. And then ultimately that's like how I sort of started following this stuff, listening to Waking Up, or now it's called Making Sense, his podcast, Sam Harris's podcast. And then then in 2015 I wanted to make my first film, and a producer actually who was a student of Pete's, Peter Boghossian, he was like, oh, you need to email this guy. Like, he would probably be a good fit for, connecting you to people. And Pete was really generous, and he connected me with a benefactor. And then from there, I decided to film an event for Peter for free, because he had helped me out. And that was the 2017, right after the election of Trump. That was Pete and Christina Hoff Sommers and Dave Rubin. And then from there, I sort of started working with Andy No to film more of the events, like the James Damore event and that kind of thing. So I just started reading all these people's books, and I met James Lindsay and Helen Pluckrose, and so that's kind of how I got into this world. And then what inspired my desire to make the film was just seeing the polarization and seeing how people didn't want to talk to each other anymore, and just how divisive things had gotten since Trump. And so that's how I came to it.
Yeah, when you say you filmed the Damore one, was that the one that Heather Heying was at, and they?
Yep, and Helen and the activist ripped out the
knocked
cords.
Everything out. Yeah, you were there for that.
Yeah. That went viral.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing, is like, this stuff does, and I've consumed it all. I became obsessed with it, around that same time, 2016 or so, and in my world of education, and I was just looking left, looking right, and no teachers were tracking this thing, like none.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe it. And then I just, got in touch with Heterodox Academy and trying to push them. And then now it's kind of happening. Teachers are reaching out to me every day now, sending me emails and stuff and saying like, hey, I'm worried about this, and this is going on. So, cause a lot of it is having to do, I don't know what the term is. I know John McWhorter's writing it's going to be a great book on it, but
right.
I don't know. Is it woke? Whatever this is, critical social justice.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think, in James and Helen's book, Cynical Theories, they refer to it by a few different things, but in particular, woke social justice ideology. But, it's been transmuted from postmodernism to what they call applied postmodernism to now social justice activism. What's that?
Post-colonialism also is
right. That's a part of it. Yeah. So woke is sort of a term that I think encompasses a lot of different aspects of this way of thinking, and really a number of ideologies that mostly come from university, as you know. And I'm glad to hear that people are reaching out to you now and sort of to be aware of it.
It's cool. It's cool. Like, I mean, I'm busy, but it's something
right.
I was scouring the internet, trying to find like-minded people, especially in education, to find.
Sure.
When you said it started from like the new atheist movement, what's very interesting is how, and I've talked about this a little bit, but we can go into it, is how atheists are some of the most vocal ones talking about this woke stuff, because a lot of the woke people are atheist.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, my theory for that is fairly simple, and other people have laid it out, but there has been a decline in religion, especially over the last 25, 30 years. And I guess to give Jordan Peterson his due, I think that a lot of people do want, I don't know if I'd use the word need, but certainly want a kind of religious-like story, a narrative to guide their lives and give them meaning. And the atheist movement didn't really provide that. It just said, hey, we all don't believe in something. There was nothing unifying really, other than a lack of a belief, right? And so I think naturally that there was a huge rift, especially in, I think, around 2010, and a lot of people became kind of woke, or I don't think they would call it that at the time, but there was like atheism plus and these other things that tried to I think they wanted a cause. They wanted something bigger than themselves, which I totally understand and can appreciate. It's just a bummer that it turned out to be this divisive ideology.
Yeah, and the people pushing back against it, while a lot of them are atheists, a lot of them are not. And
Sure.
I think it's just one of those things. It's the things that bother atheists is like, just the blind kind of acceptance of these things, and that element is here. It looks very much like, and Jonathan Haidt has said that, and John McWhorter and Peter
Right.
and James and all them, obviously. But it's been really cool because I've had good conversations, and I'm not an atheist, but I've had great conversations with my atheist friends, from this lot, and they're all super polite. And so like, yep, you believe
Yeah.
that based on these reasons, and I believe this based on these reasons, or I don't have these beliefs. And like, cool,
Sure.
high five, let's move on,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think anyone should be able to believe whatever they want. And, the only issue I take with religion is really when it enters the public sphere, or, when people start acting on beliefs that are harmful to other people.
Right.
But I think anyone should be able to be free to believe or not believe in whatever they want. So,
Well, yeah, and that brings up a good point, because if I'm Christian, one of the things that rubs me wrong is when Christians try to push, you have to do this, or you blah 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 blah, embarrass you,
right.
or ridicule you, or say all these things. And I get it, because they really believe, and you grew up like this, so like they
Right.
really believe that like, I am saving you, I'm doing a good thing. But
Sure.
that's what the woke do too. It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the same.
Even more mercilessly and without redemption.
There's no forgiveness.
Yeah, that's the biggest problem with this, new woke religion, is that there is no redemption. At least in Christianity and Islam and, other religions, there's something that you do to become better and to sort of cleanse yourself, or reach a higher state of consciousness, or whatever it is, salvation. But with this woke stuff, it's, as Peter said, the work is never done. You have to do the work, as Robin DiAngelo likes to say. And yeah, there's no forgiveness, like you said. So it's really unfortunate. But I wanted to take a step back and because you mentioned Haidt and Heterodox Academy and stuff,
Yeah.
and that I don't remember how I found his book, The Righteous Mind, but I found that in 2017 when I was interested in making this film, the first time I got interested in it. And I just loved The Righteous Mind. I thought it was brilliant. I thought, like, the subtitle says it all. I'm blanking on it right now, of course, but
Why science? Why politics?
Why good people are divided by politics and religion. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and so that like inspired me to want to help people understand more deeply why we're divided and how to talk across these divides, because we are all more or less good people, and we all want a lot of the same things. We just have different moral intuitions and different drives. And I grew up with that more fundamentalist kind of dogmatic version of Christianity, and that obviously rubbed me the wrong way. But there are a lot of people who aren't like that and who are willing to live and let live. And so I wanted to somehow encapsulate that in a film, and present that to people with a better understanding of each other, to humanize people instead of demonize them, and then also to find ways to like really engage in one-on-one interactions in a way that we don't immediately assume that the other person is bad, or that they're beyond redemption, or whatever.
Right. Yeah. When we say it's a religion, I mean, the way John McWhorter said, he's like, I don't mean like it is a religion. He's like, when you say to someone, trying to explain to them why, intersectionality or whatever it is, what some element of this, ideas of anti-racism, Ibram Kennedy's ideas, why they don't hold up. It's like telling a Mormon that, Joseph Smith didn't come down with the tablets. It's just, there's no like concept. And we don't, and with the issue why we need to label it a religion, by my thoughts, and I want to get your thoughts on this, is when we label something religion, then there is a clear church and state, that we don't mandate religion, good, but we are mandating wokeness.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I was just watching McWhorter on the Claire Lehman's that video podcast, whatever they just did not too long ago with Josh Epps, I think. And yeah, he was saying that, and that's what I thought about too. That if we clarify that this is religious, it is a religion, then maybe there would be some way to as you say, separate it from governance, and unfortunately, right now, that's sort of the opposite is happening, except for Trump pushing back against CRT, critical race theory. But I don't know how effective that's going to be.
What are your thoughts on that? Because when I hear Trump say that, I go, Donald, please just. Because I don't want to be. I don't want to have it be associated with Trump. That's my concern.
No, that's what I was talking with Douglas the other day about. My expressing my concern that people
Douglas
who are people who are anti-Trump are going to reflexively just say, well, anything that he's talking negatively about must be a good thing.
Yes.
And of course, he has exaggerations. And I didn't really watch his speech, but I heard about it, and it sounded like he made some good points, but some were over the top as usual. So it's hard to say what effect it'll have. I am worried, like you, that it might not be a positive one. People don't like to do the sort of deep work and like look at this stuff at a deep level. And so hopefully, with more people talking about it openly and honestly, we can have a better understanding of it. And so
well, they are, I say this all the time, but they are like Trojan horse terms. And even now I'm dealing with a lot of people who are I've been in this world for a while. You have, even longer than me. And like when someone is like, wait, if it's anti-racist, that means that they're against racism. It's like, when people are called like Antifa, they're just anti-fascist, Will. Like, what are you talking about? I'm just like, oh man, like I gotta
there's a lot of work to do.
A lot. Like I have to like explain. Yeah. Someone actually said, I was talking to a parent just the other day, and she said, what's like your 30-second elevator pitch why critical race theory is dangerous? And I was like, that's a great question. I don't know. I got to ask my crew that, and you can be my crew. Like, what would you say is like a 30-second pitch of the dangers of critical race theory, in particular in schools, but really all over? That's a hard one, right?
Yeah, it is hard. I mean, it's fairly complex and it has a lot of different roots, but I would say ultimately it makes us obsessively focus on race, and it does the opposite of the vision that MLK laid out, right? Yeah. So it makes us obsessively focus on race, racial differences. It makes whites out to be bad by default. It makes blacks out to be victims by default. This isn't a positive unifying doctrine, and it's divisive. That's what I'd say. It's very divisive. Yeah.
I heard Peter
doesn't.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, I heard Peter. Sorry to interrupt you. I just heard Peter one time just say, "It's bullshit. The whole thing is bullshit." That's kind of the way that Peter is. He's just like very blunt.
Right.
And I was like, I need a better pitch than that. But I think that's good. It's divisive. It's it highlights certain people, everything through a matrix of oppressor and oppressed, and everything as, this group is bad based on group identity, and this group is victims based on group identity, and it's divisive. I think that's pretty good. Okay, so
and there is a kernel of truth, as Pete also says, to all of it. Like, there is racism, right? And that's a problem. Right. And there may very well be structural racism or systemic racism to some extent. But
I think so.
I think CRT makes us focus in the wrong direction. I don't think that we can solve any actual existing systemic racism if we use this framework. I think it distracts us from, I think John McWhorter has talked about like court stenographers and the disadvantage that Black people have because of not typing up what they say correctly. And, so that would be an example potentially of systemic racism, if you want to call it that. Right. And so, but that's not something that even Kendry's talking about. At least I haven't heard him talk about that.
I don't even hear Kendi talk about the war on drugs much.
Right.
Maybe a little bit here, but like the war on drugs is obviously something that is negatively affecting. I mean, Breonna Taylor's warrant, like what was that for? Like all of this over and over again. And that's not part of CRT.
No. Yeah. So even though we can acknowledge, there's some truth, certainly to the concerns, the solutions applied are not helpful. They don't lead us to the claimed goals. That's my opinion of it.
Well, let's get into the documentary, because I think that documentaries are incredibly powerful and they're needed right now because, again, I'm trying to explain this stuff to people and it's very nuanced and tricky, and there's so much involved with it. because it's unnecessarily complicated, like on purpose, I think, to confuse people, the whole like ideology. But documentaries really shift people's minds and opens people's eyes up. There's so many documentaries that I've watched that have changed my life. So I think it's needed. And I was thinking about that for a while. Like, where are these documentaries? I know Mike Nana did the YouTube one on the Evergreen, which is great. But we need what you guys are doing. So so what's like the idea behind the documentary, and how can we help get it made, or what can my audience do to kind of contribute in some way? Because I think people want to be a part of this resistance.
So there are two projects that I'm working on, and they both kind of dovetail neatly. And one is more explicitly pushing back against woke ideology and examining its origins, explaining why we think it's a problem, and what you can do about it in practical terms. And I interviewed Douglas the other day, and I gave him a number of scenarios, and he gave some really great advice about what people can do practically. For instance, I said, what does a parent do who has a child in grade school that is being taught that they're either A, an eternal victim, or B, if they're white, then they're a white supremacist just by default? And he said, take your child out of that school. You shouldn't put up with that. And I said, well, okay, what about people who can't do that? And his suggestion was, well, then you need to show up to their PTA meetings. You need to express why this is a problem. So anyways, he gave some great advice. I'm really looking forward to putting that out. So that'll be a series of short videos, probably ongoing. We don't have a platform for it yet, but I can update you when we do. But that's called The Woke Reformation. And that'll feature a lot of people, Douglas Murray, Peter Boghossian. I'm hoping to get Coleman Hughes, hopefully someday McWhorter, Helen Pluckrose, all these people. I think Neil Ferguson may be in it, I'm hoping, which is
he's great,
exciting. So that's one kind of ongoing project. And like I said, unfortunately, we don't really have a website or anything for that yet. But the other project, the one I mentioned earlier, is going to be a full-length documentary feature film. I don't know when it'll be done or out, but right now we've shot a bunch of material. I interviewed Daryl Davis, which was amazing. He's definitely a hero of mine. I saw that you interviewed him too.
Yeah, I've had him on the podcast twice. I love that you've included him in this. And was that your thought? Like, hey, let's bring him in, because he's not a part of this crew, really. He's not like intellectual dark web.
No. I saw Accidental Courtesy, the documentary about him, and I was just so moved and inspired. And I love the stories he tells. He's a great storyteller, and he's just, talk about impossible conversations. He's had the most impossible conversations with people who actually hate him. And I thought, if someone like that can do this, then there's hope for the rest of us, the everyday people. So that was what inspired me. So I was fortunate enough to fly a crew out to DC and to do this kind of like Skype interview with him, and it was great. So we filmed him, we filmed Anthony when he was in town, Anthony Magnabosco, and then of course Peter. And then in addition to that, we've been, and I'm kind of rambling here, but we filmed what will be a proof of concept. So we took two of our subjects who, one was pretty far left and one's kind of a right libertarian, and had them talk about oppression, whether or not systemic oppression exists, and if violence against the state is warranted. And they kind of fumbled their way through the first conversation, obviously don't agree. And then we had Peter coach them, and then we had them have the conversation again. So that's something that we'll be releasing pretty soon. I'm excited about that. But yeah, right now we're trying to raise money to finish the rest of the film. And ideally what we're going to do, aside from these talking heads like Daryl and Peter, we're going to have probably 2 or 3 pairs of subjects of people who already know each other and who are struggling in their relationship because of some ideological difference, whether it's religious or political, doesn't really matter. And then just help them improve their conversation. Have Peter coach them, give them the book, How to Have Impossible Conversations, and just kind of track that process. Because I want to be able to offer people just really practical advice and practical examples of how this is done. And so to come back to my earlier point about Jonathan Haidt, I was inspired by his book, The Righteous Mind. And then my back went out. And so then I kind of shelved the project for a while. But then I decided, I'm not getting any better. So I just need to make this. I just need to do it. And I had a good friend that was my Kung Fu instructor, actually, Matt, and he put the money down for what we've done so far, and has been really essential to get this off the ground. And he and I disagree on a number of things, and so for part of the filming process is turning the camera on ourselves and showing our kind of impossible conversation, which has been interesting. So it's been a blast, and yeah, I'm just really hoping to, like I said, offer practical advice and just show people that this is possible, and this is why it's important to engage in these difficult conversations.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, look, the people that you're naming are those are I can't even name the 5 starters on the Lakers, I know LeBron, but the people that are in your film are just those I get starstruck, you know what I mean? It's so interesting.
Yeah, I've been so lucky.
Yeah, and you know what? But I think it's because we are on the tip of the spear for this. I think this will age really well. I think in history, people will look back at the individuals that are in your movie and the individuals that we read and follow and all that kind of stuff and talk to. And it'll be oh, they saw what was happening earlier. Because even when this was unfolding, the riots started happening in response to the George Floyd death, a lot of people were what's going on? And I was what's going on? What I've been talking about on my social media for the past 3 years is going on. What do you mean?
Right.
And it's just, and I thought that would all of a sudden be an aha moment where people open their eyes up, but it's still not. I mean,
no.
Is distribution going to be an issue for you? Netflix wouldn't take this, would they?
They might. I mean, it really, so When in Doubt is the name of the documentary.
Yeah.
And that one is much more nonpartisan. I'm trying to not take a side. I'm really just trying to present people with
just the idea of street epistemology type stuff.
More or less, but from a variety of people, like Daryl, and I'll include some other people that I've read. I've read a number of books on how to improve conversations, so I want to get some of those people in there as well. But really, the purpose of When in Doubt is just to share my experience and all the wisdom of the people that I've interviewed to show people regardless of what you believe, you should maintain that relationship with your dad, or you should still be friends with your friend who's now a Trump supporter or a Biden supporter. So it's really all about improving relationships and conversations. And the wokeism stuff may come into that a little bit,
but it's not the focus. Okay, that makes sense.
We'll have someone from that, but that's not the focus. So my first film, Also Human, is going to be distributed in, I think, January on a number of platforms. So I think I have a really good chance of getting it out there, and I don't know if it'll be Netflix or who knows at this point, but yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Eyal Rabinovich I had on my podcast. He runs an organization called Resetting the Table, where it's a similar thing. He has a short documentary on YouTube called Purple, that we talked about in the podcast, where the districts that are blue and red, that they went from Obama to Trump, and just sitting down. He has a whole process. A lot of it is the emotional side. It's helping people to feel. His big thing is helping people to feel seen and heard the way they wish to be seen and heard. And that's a cool element. I'm so deep in this. I think that this is the pathway out of this potential heading us we're headed towards some sort of weird ideological civil war, and the way out is exactly what you're doing.
That's the hope. Yeah. I mean, I'm a big believer in obviously free speech, but in just conversation in general. I mean, I've grown up having these impossible conversations, and often was not very good at it. And I've learned really what is more important than the difference of belief, which is is the relationship, right? And So even though my parents and I still wildly disagree, at least we can maintain a friendship and, you know, talk and find the points of agreement that we do have, because, you know, for instance, they're concerned about this woke stuff too, and they really liked the trailer that I made for the woke Reformation. And so there's always overlap of agreement, and I think, you know, emphasizing that and finding those points of agreement are important. Obviously, there are some issues that you have to address, even though you both disagree on something. But I think, you know, one of the goals of the film will be to humanize, like I said, humanize the people we disagree with, and realize that they must have a good reason for believing what they believe, even if we think it's utterly absurd, you know.
Yeah, I loved Peter and James's book, How to Have Impossible Conversations. And one of the things that I use all the time is, why do you think I think what I think? You know, I just love that and you untie that knot, you go, oh, that makes sense. But I have friends who stop talking to their fathers because they, you know, posted something that was, you know, they felt was racist against George Floyd, saying like, you know, George Floyd was a criminal. You know, that's what happens when you're a criminal. They don't talk to their father anymore. And I was explaining this to my class, like, okay, you know, Mr. Jenkins, right? And you know him to be a really good dude. You've known him for 4 years, really sweet, been there, been to your games, whatever. Okay, now one day he shows up with the MAGA hat on. You have two choices, really. Is it Mr. Jenkins is not who I thought he was, or MAGA hat wearers are not who I thought they were? Which one are you going to go with? And unfortunately, we so often go with, oh, Mr. Jenkins is no good. It's like, well, why? But you know him. You don't know the MAGA hat wearers. So what's going on here?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great example. Yeah, it's hard when people present a part of themselves that we didn't see, or, you know, we make immediate judgments on, and then it's easy to just cordon them off and block them out of our lives, because it's just easier to not have to deal with it, and to not have to think like, oh shit, okay, well, you know, are all Trump supporters racist? Well, no, we know this because we all know Trump supporters, right? And I know a number of them, actually more this year than 2016, sadly, but I know that they're not racist people. They're not bigots. They're not sexists, and there are reasons. They've explained these reasons. I don't agree with them, but I am perfectly happy for them to have their beliefs. You know, they don't need to conform to what I think, and I think that's important.
Yeah, when you talk to a lot of people, then what happens, I think part of this too is they don't know a lot of people that are the thing. So like, but I have a lot of friends. I'd say I have a lot of Hispanic friends, and I'd say more than 50% of my Hispanic friends are Trump supporters. So when people say like, you know, Trump hates Mexicans, like it just, that doesn't ring true to me because of, maybe it does, I don't know, but like, but it doesn't ring true because of I just have diverse friends. And I think part of this is people don't have diverse friends. So they go based on what social media tells them or something.
Yeah. Or they have friends that are diverse in, you know, immutable characteristics, skin color, et cetera, but not ideologically diverse. And I think that certainly is one of the roots of the problem. You know, I haven't read it, but the book, The Big Sort, talks about that, which is this, where people started to move to places that were more homogeneous, and it just created these really sort of like physical bubbles where, like, you know, and I moved to Seattle and then Portland because they were liberal cities, you know, so I am an exemplar of this, but I think that really started a lot of the polarization even before social media, is that people started to literally physically sort themselves and be around people that they were comfortable with. And then with the advent of social media, it gets even worse because of the advertising model and the way that all of that works, is the film The Social Dilemma has pointed out. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah, and then, you know, and it just ramps up to 1 million. Like when after the George Floyd thing, a lot of this kind of ramped up after that. For me, just I was kind of cautious about. I would talk about it, but I was a little cautious. Now I'm just full bore. And a lot of teachers, because I follow a lot of teachers on social media, they were all saying, elevate Black voices, elevate Black voices. And it was Ta-Nehisi Coates and Kendi and Rachel Cargo and all these people. And I would write to them and say, where's the diversity in their ideas? And someone I think actually more than one said, like, I was like, where are the center or conservative Black people? What about their voices? And
Right.
I think like two people said to me, well, are they saying anything different? I was like, well, John McWhorter says anti-racism is
Yeah.
worse than racism. Yeah, I'd say that's different than Ibram Kendi.
Right.
So
Right.
yes, but again, they just have no idea that even like Black people aren't some monolith or something like that, and they keep
Right.
promoting this stuff, but it doesn't. If you say, this is the way that Black people think, or the way that Jews think, or something like that. I'm friends with a lot of Jewish people, and
Yeah.
I had family say, what are their thoughts on the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting when that happened? I was like, well, first of all, it's a mass shooting. They're sad. But beyond that, like if I just took just left-leaning Jewish people, they would probably say this is a gun issue. But if I asked right-leaning Jewish people, they would say, like, let's get more guns in the synagogues. Like
Right.
that's that's like how people react to this stuff needs to be better represented, and it's not.
Yeah, and it really always grosses me out when we refer to a person based on their group membership and think, as you said, there's like a Black thought or Black culture, like there's a white culture and a white thought. Like I don't identify in any way with the lightness of my skin, and I don't care if anybody else does. That's fine, but it just strikes me as very bizarre to think that like there's a standard, reaction from Black people in general about any issue. I just assume that they're all individuals, and sure, a lot of people have overlapping ideas, and there's, ideology plays into that, but it really bothers me when people talk about, Black thought or white thought or any of that stuff, because I think like that's just robbing each individual of their own potential opinion, and we're just lumping everyone together, and it's, to me, I think that's an example of racism. I don't appreciate it.
That's where you're at is where we should be heading. I think it might be one of those things, like one of the arguments of critical race theory would say, well, that's because you're in white culture and you're surrounded. You didn't have to think about your skin color.
Sure.
There's truth to that, but isn't that the goal though? Like, shouldn't we be telling young Black kids that like, hey, who you are is not that color of your skin. It's the way you treat people, your effort, your abilities, your talents, all that. Like, shouldn't we be hammering that into their heads? You know what I mean? And
one would think. I mean,
yeah,
I can appreciate that to an extent. The idea of like, well, this is what I've grown up with, and so that's shaped. Like, sure, we're all, as D'Angelo likes to say, we're shaped by the forces of socialization, but only to a degree, and there are many forces of socialization pushing in many different directions. And so the way in which I grew up, I was just telling a friend this last night. My parents had good friends from our church that adopted a Black boy and girl. I never thought about the fact that they were Black. It was never mentioned. No one gave a shit. We were just friends. We hung out. Like, sure, I was socialized in white culture, maybe, whatever that means, but I don't know. I'm very skeptical of that because it never mattered, and it always struck me as bizarre that it would matter to people. So that's my position.
No, I hear. There was one Black kid in my neighborhood growing up, and he was my best friend for a couple of years, and it didn't occur to me. Like I knew the same way that like I have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. Like they know, like, oh, he's a brown guy. They don't, but that's like only when they say that, when they're like describing which guy, when I'm watching like UFC fighters, like there's no recognition that has anything to do with who they are as a person.
Right. Or like, any negative connotation.
Or definitely no negative connotation. Yeah, not at all.
Yeah.
And then but then say like, no, actually, that's wrong, buddy. He is different. It's like, what the fuck are you doing? Why would you do that? Like, it's so nuts. It's nuts.
It's bizarre.
Well, the way out of it is part of what you're doing, Travis. So how do we find and support the stuff that you're doing?
Yeah, so there's our website, which is whenindoubtfilm.com. You can really find everything there. We have a newsletter you can sign up to, and we're slowly releasing some content. Our teasers on there, and there'll be some other videos. And then we're crowdfunding to try to finish the film, and that is just GoFundMe.com/whenindoubtfilm. So GoFundMe.com/When in Doubt Film. And we've got some good traction, and I think we've got some big donors coming up. So I'm feeling pretty good about it. But yeah, that's
Good.
So,
Well, to people listening, it's the audience of this podcast is growing, and it's people that are seeing it, and people that want to contribute. I get a lot of people reaching out. It's just like, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? So when I saw an opportunity to bring you on, Travis, and like, okay, yeah, well, maybe I can throw some people your way, because the people want to contribute. They want to feel a part of. They watch these movies from Star Wars on, about the rebellion and the resistance. And I saw someone tweet, it was pretty funny. It's like, you're not the rebellion or the resistance if you're aligned with all the mainstream media, every celebrity, every
right.
This is the resistance.
Yeah, that's I'm gonna butcher her name, but Aisha Akanbi.
Aisha Akanbi. She's the best, right?
She's amazing. But she was talking about that with Coleman, the idea of people thinking they're resisting, but really just being conformists.
Yeah.
They're all just conforming to this same ideology, and it's interesting.
Yeah, her and Chloe Valdary are like two that I just.
Oh, she's great.
Just like, yes, like those are some leaders to help us out of this nonsense too. So I'm glad that they're getting some traction. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. And one more way that people, I mean, depending on where you live, we'll be looking for subjects in the Pacific Northwest to be in the film. Someone that's struggling with a conversation or with a relationship. We have some potential people that may be in the film, but we'll be looking for more. So that's another thing you can find on our website, is you can submit your story.
Cool.
And so, yeah.
All right, Travis, I really appreciate you coming on and doing this. I know it's like not even comfortable for you to do. So I appreciate it. I love what you're doing. And any way that I can help, I'm going to help, because this is cool. It's cool to feel like you're a part of doing some good in the world.
Thanks. No, I really appreciate it. And I appreciate what you do. And being in the school system and teaching those ideas and getting people to think more critically about critical race theory is super vital. So I appreciate that.
All right, bud. All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. See ya.